Okay, we have an interesting long answer problem here regarding collection of gases. So when you see a setup like this, it can be a little bit overwhelming, but just take a beat, slow down, make sure you understand what's going on before you look at any of the questions. So this says ethene, C2H4 gas, may be prepared by the dehydration of ethanol using a solid catalyst. A setup for the lab synthesis is shown in the diagram above. This is the equation for the dehydration reaction. And we've got a delta H value and we've got a delta S value. So change in enthalpy and change in entropy. These are both standard values. So we're at 298. Now, so what is this saying? We've got a Bunsen burner here. We're heating up some ethanol, right? And so the ethanol is going to react because of the catalyst, and it's going to dehydrate, so it's losing a water molecule, right? We're taking one of these H's and an OH, and that's leaving as a water molecule, and we're getting ethene. And so the ethene gas is going up here, it's going down, and it's going into the water, and it's bubbling up, and then it's being collected right up here. So that's what's going on in the reaction. Now, the student adds a 0.2 gram sample of ethanol to a test tube and then heated the test tube gently with a Bunsen burner until all of the ethanol evaporated and gas generation stopped. So everything in here is going down here, and then we're getting ethene up there. Now, when the reaction stopped, the volume of collected gas was 0.0854 liters at 0.822 atmospheres, and this was at 305 K, and we're given the vapor pressure of water at that temperature. So the question is, the first question, calculate the number of moles of ethene gas, one, that are actually produced in the experiment and measured in the gas collection tube, and two, that would be produced if the dehydration reaction went to completion. So what we're saying is all of this is going to evaporate and go down here. And then we're going to collect as much ethene as we can, right? We're going to get some amount of ethene. It's not going to go 100% to completion because some of the ethanol is going to evaporate without reacting. Right, so some of the ethanol just goes into the gas phase, comes down here, and we'll talk more about that later. But so we don't get every single molecule reacting perfectly, but we have some data that we can use for this first one. Now we want to know the moles produced, and we're given a volume, we're given a pressure, and we're given a temperature, and we're dealing with a gas. So that should tip you off to the fact when you have 3 of the 4 variables in the ideal gas law, you're probably going to use the ideal gas law, right? We know the volume of the gas that we collected, we know the pressure in there, and we know the temperature. So we're going to plug these into the ideal gas law. There's just one little trick that we have to, there's one catch here, because the thing is the vapor pressure of water at 305 K is 35.7 torr. So the reason that's important is that right up here, we have the ethene gas that we collected, but we also have some water vapor because there's water right here. Some of those water molecules are going to be in the gas phase. They're going to exist as water vapor at any given time, and that's going to contribute to the total pressure in here. But we don't want that in there because we don't care about the water vapor. We're trying to figure out how much ethene is in there. So we have to subtract the vapor pressure of water at that temperature in order to get the pressure, or really the partial pressure of ethene. That's what we want. That's what we're going to put into the ideal gas law. So what we have to do is we say 35.7 torr. We want atmospheres, right? So let's do 1 atmosphere over 760 torr. That's going to be 0.0470 atmospheres. Okay, so that is the partial pressure of the water vapor. The water molecules that are as a gas in there are exerting this pressure. Now here is the total pressure. Here's the total pressure that we can measure up there. So all we have to do is subtract the partial pressure of the water vapor from the total pressure, and we're going to get 0.775. So 0.775 atmospheres is the pressure we want. That's the pressure exerted by the ethene molecules. And we need that only without the water, because now we're going to try to figure out the moles of ethene. So how are we going to get the moles of ethene? So let's plug this in. So we know PV equals nRT, right? And we're trying to get N. So let's make things easier on ourselves and divide both sides by RT so that N equals PV over RT. Then we can just plug everything in, right? So let's say that N equals, and we're going to put in 0.775 atmospheres, because that is the partial pressure of ethene. We're going to put in 0.0854 liters, because that's the volume of the sample. And then we're going to put that over. We do want to know this gas constant, right? This is R 0.08206, and that's liters atmospheres per mole Kelvin. And then the temperature is 305 K. So we plug all of that in, and we get N equals 0.00264 moles. So that is part one. Part one is 0.00264 moles. That is the moles of ethene that were actually physically collected. That's why we used this data, because this data pertains to this experiment. It's a certain amount of ethene that we actually physically collected. Now, part two says that would be produced if the dehydration reaction went to completion. This is essentially this is what would be the theoretical yield, right? This is if every molecule of ethanol was successfully dehydrated and generated an ethene molecule that was collected and went towards the data. So we don't have to look at the data now, because we're not looking at an experiment. This is a hypothetical situation. What if all of it reacted? So let's do this one right up here so we have a little more room. All we have to do is understand that we've got 0.2 grams of ethanol, and we're just going to use the molar mass as we're given here. We have a mass of ethanol, so let's get moles of ethanol. And so we can do 1 mole over 46.1 grams, right? We want to put grams on the bottom because we want it to cancel. And that is going to give us 0.00434 moles. So this is part two right there. Right, so this, so that's the moles of ethanol, and if every mole of ethanol made a mole of ethene, it's the same number, right? So we didn't have to do anything more with this number. We just took the grams of ethanol and figured out how many moles that is, and if all of that reacted, we should get that same number of moles of ethene. So that's the theoretical yield, right? If everything went perfectly. So now percent yield is very easy, right? We just take actual over theoretical times 100. So the actual yield, remember all this data that we collected, that's the actual yield, 0.00264 over the theoretical yield, 0.00434 times 100, and we should get 60.8% yield, 60.8%. So we did an experiment, we got some data, and we used that data to get the actual yield, right? The moles that we collected, and then the theoretical yield, easy to calculate, and then 1 over the other times 100% yield. So we definitely want to be able to do that. Now, because the dehydration reaction is not observed to occur at 298 Kelvin, the student, remember, we're heating this up a little bit, we're heating it gently. The student claims that the reaction has an equilibrium constant less than 1 at 298 Kelvin. Do the thermodynamic data for the reaction support the student's claim? So if we're looking at the equilibrium constant, remember, the equilibrium constant is telling us if it is greater than 1, products are favored, which means the forward reaction is favorable. If the equilibrium constant is less than 1, it means the reactants are favored, which means the forward reaction is not particularly favorable. The reverse reaction is more favorable. And so delta G, remember delta G is about spontaneity. If we're saying that at 298K the reaction does not occur, then this doesn't seem like it's very favorable. It should not be particularly spontaneous, which means we're probably looking for a positive delta G. However, they want you to calculate it, so that makes sense. We're going to calculate the delta G. Remember that delta G is just delta H minus T delta S. Very important equation. We're going to use it all the time. We definitely need to know that one. So in this case, delta G at 298, this data, we're given the delta H and the delta S at 298. And so the delta H is 45.5 kilojoules per mole. And we're going to subtract from that, T is 298K. And then delta S, be very careful here. This is a very common source of error. Delta H's are typically reported in kilojoules per mole, while changes in entropy are typically reported in joules per mole Kelvin. So we're going to have to divide this by 1,000. Very common source of error. But make sure you don't make this mistake. This is joules right here. So we don't want 126. We want 0.126. We have to divide that by 1,000. And so now that's in kilojoules per mole K. And so the K, the kelvins cancel out. And if we plug that into the calculator, we're going to get 8.0 kilojoules per mole. So that makes sense. We have a positive delta G, so the forward reaction is not spontaneous, not particularly spontaneous, and so that is in line with an equilibrium constant of being less than 1. So we want to understand what the equilibrium constant means, whether it's greater or less than 1. What the delta G means, if it's positive or negative. We have to be able to calculate the delta G and see that it is positive and what that means. So there's the first few. Let's do just a couple more bits. So the Lewis electron dot diagram for C2H4, this is ethene right here. Ethene has a double bond between the carbon, that's between the two carbons. That's why we see two bonding pairs of electrons there. And now in the box on the right, we want to complete the Lewis diagram for ethanol by drawing in all of the electron pairs. So usually we would do lines, but they want these pairs of electrons. So when we have a bond, we're gonna leave it as a pair of electrons. That seems to be how they want this to be done. So we're gonna just remember from carbon to hydrogen, we can only have one bond, right? That's all that's ever gonna be the case. And so likewise here. And so, of course, here we see that there's only one bond now. In ethanol, there's only one bond between the carbons because carbon's got 3 bonds over here. This one's got 3 over here. There's 1 between them. And then there's 1 between the carbon and the oxygen, 1 between the oxygen and the hydrogen. And now remember, oxygen has 6 valence electrons, so 1 for this bond, 1 for this bond, and there are 4 left over. So oxygen is going to have 2 lone pairs. So you're going to want your diagram to look exactly like this, okay? Now, what is the approximate value of the COH bond angle? So we're looking at this right here, COH bond angle. And so what we need to understand is that if we're looking, let's look just at oxygen as the central atom, right? We can have an H down there, and we can have C2H5 over here. This is what this is going to look like. Remember, oxygen has 4 electron domains: atom, atom, lone pair, lone pair. 4 electron domains means this is sp3 hybridized, right? Oxygen is sp3 hybridized, so it has tetrahedral electron domain geometry. Tetrahedral electron domain geometry, and because of the 2 lone pairs, the molecular shape is bent. But regardless, the bond angles obey roughly the 109.5 degree bond angles that are exhibited in, say, methane. Right, so we're going to say, we can just, I think to play it safe, even though it's not completely accurate, the best thing to say is just 109.5. Right, because 109.5 is what it would be in methane. Now, in fact, it's a little closer to the bond angles in water, so it's a little less. It's actually a little less than that. But they're going to give you a window, right? They don't want to see 90 degrees. They don't want to see 120. Or 180, right? But they want to see somewhere right in that region of the bond angles that are acceptable for complexes with tetrahedral electron domain geometry. So we're going to want 109.5. I think is good. You could put a little less if you wanted to, but that's that one. And then finally, during the dehydration experiment, the ethene gas and unreacted ethanol. So remember earlier, that's why we didn't get a percent yield of 100%, because some of the ethanol does not react, but nevertheless evaporates and goes through the tube. But these both pass through the tube into the water. The ethene was quantitatively collected as a gas. We get all of that up in the top of the tube. But the unreacted ethanol was not. So the ethanol vapor does not go up into the top of the tube. Explain this observation in terms of the intermolecular forces between water and each of the 2 gases. Okay, so water, and then we have ethanol, and then we have ethene. Let's make that look a little better. Ethene. So what are these doing? We've got a net dipole over here, and we have an OH bond right here. So it wants to talk about intermolecular forces between water and each of the 2 gases. What's going on between water and ethanol? Well, water has a net dipole, and it is capable of hydrogen bonding, and ethanol is also capable of hydrogen bonding. So these guys are going to make hydrogen bonds with one another, and that is why ethanol is water soluble. Right? It's got this OH group. Water has OH. Those bond dipoles are going to interact to make hydrogen bonds, which are favorable interactions, and so ethanol is highly water soluble. Ethene gas, on the other hand, is not particularly water soluble, right? Because this does not have any ability to make hydrogen bonds or dipole-dipole interactions or anything like that. This is exclusively going to interact via dispersion forces, or rather, in this case, we would say dipole-induced dipole interactions, because the dipole on the water molecule is creating an induced dipole on ethene, and so there is going to be some interaction. It's a dispersion interaction, but that's not going to be very significant. So H bond, and then over here we're saying no H bond. And so this is soluble, and this is insoluble. So because ethene gas is insoluble in water, it's going to pass through the water and bubble up and be collected in the tube. Whereas ethanol is water soluble, so it goes in the water, it's just going to stay in the water. Because it is soluble, it's happy to interact with water molecules. Whereas ethene is not happy in there, it's going to go straight up out into the top of the tube. So that's a pretty good question. It's looking at an experimental setup, making sure you understand what's going on, doing some stoichiometric calculations, looking at a Lewis diagram, talking about thermodynamics, talking about solubility. There's a lot going on in this one, so that's a very cool question.